Howdy everybody, it is Mr. Ensminger once again. This video is going to be pretty brief, is my thoughts. There's not going to be any coding, it's going to be just some notes. I wanted to spend our live time, the synchronous time, focusing on the programs. And I thought that using one of the asynchronous lessons this week would be good to just kind of put this out there, talk about operator overloading, some of the rules, and what can you do, what can't you do type things. Just talk about everything about it, but do it in a video. So here we go. If you want to take these notes with me, because I'm not going to save these are on you. Let's just begin. Computer science operator overload notes. So I'm just going to reveal as we go and talk about each one. So what is operator overloading? So far when you've done your classes, fraction, complex, rectangle, circle, all the classes, we've used functions, and it makes it work, but it's a little bit awkward when you do stuff like f1 dot add fraction parenthesis f2. Like, it'd be better and more natural, if you want to call programming natural, to just say plus and equals, like sum equals f1 plus f2. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, guess what? Operator overloading makes that possible. We're going to make an operator, which is a symbol, plus, minus, times, divide. But there's lots of others. We're going to make them overloaded. Overloaded is when you have more than one task for the same thing. So we've talked about function overloading, two fractions, same name, but different inputs. Operator overloading is going to be an operator that does more than one thing. So, operator overloading, making C++ operators work with objects, including classes. Plus, minus, greater than can also be overloaded, less than can be overloaded. Nearly every single operator can be overloaded. There's an appendix in the back of the book that shows you a list of all the operators. Less than, greater than, equal to, they're all there. There's only a handful that you can't overload, and the two that you're familiar with, the colon, and question mark, colon, you can't overload those, but, okay, so bad, so what? All right, let's keep going. So this week, some of the examples we're going to be looking at, less than has several purposes, right? We use that to print out cout, less than. It works as the stream insertion operator. Like, that's how we've used it. But there's also another purpose for that, which is outside the scope of our class. It is something called the bitwise left shift operator. I'll let that sink in for a minute. I won't even try and talk about what that is. It's basically like moving the bit in a binary digits around. If you guys that do some of the engineering classes, I think they talk about bit shifting a little bit. But again, in the scope of our class, don't worry about it. My main point is this. The operators already, some of them, have more than one purpose. We've seen it with the time sign. The asterisk works for multiplication, but it also is for the pointer. It does two different things. Plus, in other languages, plus adds numbers, but it also does concatenation. So we already know that some operators can do more than one thing. And another example, plus has several definitions depending on what type of variables you're working with. You can add integers. You can add doubles. Right? So plus also is overloaded to work with different variable types. But we want to get it working for our stuff. And so when we talk about operator overloading, you have to think about the context. You want to make these things work, but also make sense, right? So you don't just want to make, like, oh, plus sign is going to magically do something else. Like, plus sign is going to do addition. That's what you're using it for, to add fractions, to add complex numbers. Would you want to add a student? Would you want to add a circle? No, because, like, what would you do? How would you add a circle? How would you add a triangle? So different operators have different context. So you have to be cognizant of that. So again, the whole idea of this is that you want to replace a function with an operator, as you would with normal variables. So operator overloading can be performed with function calls, but operators make more sense. So let's say you had something like this. You have sentence.add word 1, word 2. So you're adding 2 words and you're getting a sentence, right? That works. It works. It works fine. But wouldn't it be so much more natural to do that? That's why we're doing this. I'm going to show you how you can overload operators. So some of the rules and regulations. For operator overloading, you can use built-in types or you can use your own types. You can't use your own operators though. Like you can't make up operators. You can't suddenly have like %, $sign together. And then that's an operator that does something. So you have to stick with the stuff that exists and make it do different things. So like +sign exists, now make it work with your fractions. But you can't have suddenly, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. That's not a thing. Okay. So operators, and you're going to see some examples together this week. Operators are overloaded by writing a function, just like a normal function, but the function name is the operator. And so, for example, as you're going to see in our examples, operator plus is going to overload the +sign. And so we'll see some examples of that. To use an operator on a class object, so a variable of class, you have to overload the operator with 2 exceptions. Equals is already done for you to a degree. And again, when we do the examples, this will make more sense. The other one that works is the ampersand. If you looked at the pointers video before this, you know the ampersand gives you the address of. It's the location in memory. So that also works without having to mess with it. Again, we talk about context. Just like you should never name a variable something that it isn't really. Like you don't want to make sum equal num1 minus num2 because you're doing difference. Like why would you subtract to get the difference or the sum, right? Like name it what it should be. So you shouldn't make the minus sign do powers. You shouldn't make the division sign do mod, right? Like make the sign what it should do in the context of. So like plus adds, minus subtracts, things like that. There are certain things you can't mess with when you're doing these things. The order of operations, that is a solid fact. You cannot change that. If you overload plus and you overload times, times will always come before plus. No matter what you coded, times will always come before plus. The associativity, which is the way you group things. Quantity 2 plus 3 plus 4 is equal to 2 plus quantity 3 plus 4. You can't change that either. You cannot change the associativity of an operator. The arity of an operator. The arity is what I talked about with the operands, the unary, the binary in the pointer video. The +sign requires you to have 2 things, left and right. Okay, so like you can't change that. Plus plus, you can only put 1 thing before plus plus. So same thing here. So that's what I mean is like you can't all of a sudden make up x plus plus y. It doesn't work that way. The way an operator works with the built-in stuff, you can't change that. You can overload it to work with your stuff, but you can't change the fact that plus adds things. You can't change the fact that mod will give you remainder. You can make it work for your stuff, but you can't change the way that C++ is inherently coded. And then finally, overloading a related operator will not do the others. So overloading plus does not make plus plus work. It does not make plus equals work. You've got to do that. Overloading less than does not make less than or equal to work. You've got to code that. So every one of them must be done. There's no shortcuts. And then finally, in one of the examples, the phone number example, you're going to see functions defined as friends. A friend function is a function that's defined outside of the class, but it has the right to access the public, private, and protected members of the class. Now, we haven't talked about protected. That's a access modifier that comes up in Java for the most part. So basically, a friend function knows all about you. It knows your secrets. So it's a function that's a friend of the class, but it's not with the class. So it can access the stuff in there as if it were part of the class. Again, this was just an overview of the notes, some of the rules and regulations. We're going to be working with the operator overloading this week. So we'll also put some notes in the programs we do. Have a good one.